Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, everybody take a deep breath and exhale. Chiefs are still 9-3, okay? Still not a bad place to be. My name is Steve Weberg. I'm with the Public Affairs Department of the Kansas City Public Library, and on behalf of the library, I wanted to thank you for coming and welcome you to a discussion that I think will be informative, entertaining, illuminating. I'm sure you all are here for the same reason I am. I care about football. This is an issue that's near and dear to me. I spent 30 years as a sports writer with USA Today, focusing, among other things, on college football. Spent a number of Sundays in NFL press boxes, including Arrowhead. I know that you're here because you care about football as well, and you cared about football before the Chiefs were 9-3 and before the Tigers were 11-1 and a couple of steps away from playing for a national championship. I spent last Friday in St. Louis watching our local high school team play for the state championship. So football's become our national pastime. But we're going to take a pause tonight from the games and the title chases to address an issue that's important and timely, and frankly put what's now our national pastime a little bit on its heels. We've wanted to discuss the issue of discussions at the library here and overall football safety and welfare since the NFL settled its suit that was brought by several thousand former players back in August. This was the earliest we could work it into our schedule. I knew, unfortunately, that the issue was not going away, and indeed that it hasn't. It has not. PBS aired League of Denial, which I'm sure many of you saw, that raised questions about how the NFL has handled the concussions issue. It's been revealed that a couple of Hall of Famers, Tony Dorsett and Joe DeLamielleure, have been diagnosed with a degenerative cognitive condition that's known as CTE, that's been connected with head trauma. Brett Favre, no less than Brett Favre, questioned whether if he had a son, he would want him to play football. That echoed what President Obama said earlier in the year. And most sadly, I think, just last month, within the space of a week, we had a high school football player in Tipton, Missouri, just about 2 hours east of here, die after suffering what appeared to be a serious brain injury on the field, and then a football player in the playoffs in state of Arizona die in Phoenix after a football-related injury. For its part, the NFL has been trying to emphasize safety in its rules making. It's partnered with USA Football, and Carl Peterson will be here tonight, and he will talk about this because he is integral to this process to address safety at the youth football level. And tonight also, I don't know if any of you are aware, but Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, is in town. He is at the Chiefs practice facility next to Arrowhead and is working with a safety clinic for the mothers of youth football players. So it's really pretty cool to me that on this night, Kansas City is front and center in addressing the issue. I'm looking forward to the discussion we're going to have, and right now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Roger Twibell. 35 years as a broadcast sports reporter. He was a Sports Center anchor back when ESPN was just a baby back in the early 80s. He's been in the middle of both ESPN's and ABC's coverage of college football and basketball and golf, both in a play-by-play capacity and in the studio. He's also worked with the NBA, boxing, skiing, track and field, tennis. He was the preseason voice of the Chiefs for 15 years. He's hosted a sports talk radio show here in Kansas City. He's now a golf entrepreneur and has come up with an ingenious putter that you can have your company or other logos on it and be looking at your logo as you're sinking your putts. He's from Shawnee Mission. Originally, he went to Arizona, University of Arizona, to play both football and baseball. And injuries derailed his career. He wound up at KU, graduated in 1973. In one way or the other, he's just way too qualified to be a part of this panel. He's had 5 concussions. 2 of them football related, 2 of them baseball related, and another concussion. I'm not sure how he came up with that. But he still lives in Mission Hills. He is the father of Shawnee Mission East's reigning homecoming queen. And I would like to introduce to you Roger Twibell, and the rest of our panelists will come out and he will introduce them. Thank you. Roger?
Steve, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction and the plug for my beautiful daughter. That was very, very nice of you. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being here with us tonight. Just to kind of tell you a little bit about the program, we'll be talking to our distinguished panel up here for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we're going to take some of your questions after that. So keep that in mind as we, move along this evening, and we'll certainly look forward to a lively discussion with some good ideas and some good thoughts going forward concerning our topic tonight, concussions in the NFL and other player health and safety concerns, and not just NFL, but down through college and high school and youth football. Joining us on the panel tonight, I'd like to first welcome Mr. Carl Peterson, who was the president, general manager, and CEO of the Kansas City Chiefs from 1989 to 2009. And Carl presently is the chairman of USA Football. That's a NFL-funded organization that draws its membership from football players, coaches, commissioners, games officials, and they emphasize training and safety. And we'll hear from Carl about some very innovative ideas that USA Football is putting out there. Also with us this evening is Mr. Conrad Dobler, who played over a decade in the National Football League with the Cardinals, the Saints, and the Bills. At one time, he was called the dirtiest man in pro football, but I'm here to tell you he's a sweetheart of a guy. And we've certainly enjoyed having Conrad in the community for a number of years. He currently runs a Overland Park-based firm that sets up flu shot clinics locally and around the country. And finally, the third member of our panel tonight is Trent Green. And of course, Trent spent 15 years in the National Football League, and we remember him here in Kansas City with some absolutely fantastic offensive football teams coached by Dick Vermeil. And of course, Trent is involved now in broadcasting and still makes his home here in Kansas City. So would you give a nice round of applause here for our panel tonight? As I make my way over to the place that I'm going to sit here, and give me a moment, I had knee replacement surgery about 9 days ago, so I'll tell you what, it was a great Thanksgiving, though, I can tell you that. I'm about 29 knee replacement surgeries behind Conrad, though, I can tell you that. Sometimes we know Carl, Trent, Conrad as the players, the general manager, but do we really know him as a person? And Trent, you grew up in the St. Louis area, attended Indiana University. Tell me a little bit about your youth. When did you start playing football, and did you play other sports too growing up?
Well, really the majority of the sports I played growing up were basketball and baseball. I never or didn't get really involved in football. My parents were under, this was they were ahead of their time a little bit, but they didn't want my brother or I to play tackle football until we were 12 years old. Somehow that was what they had made up in their mind. 12 years old is when you were big enough or mature enough to where you could deal with the hits. And so played some flag football, but at that time growing up there wasn't a lot of flag football. So it was more once I got to 7th grade, that's when I started. And the interesting thing, I tried telling, I have a son that's a junior in high school and another son that's an 8th grader. I let them start. They wore me out trying to get me to start early. I said, I didn't start till 7th grade. You guys can start at 7th grade. They wore me out. They started in 6th grade, but I did coach them in flag football from kindergarten all the way up until they started playing tackle. I didn't have that advantage, but there's so much you can learn from tackle football. You learn the techniques, you learn teamwork, you learn the terminology. There's a lot that can be learned from that, and you're not taking the hit. So I'm a big big advocate of at an early age playing flag football, and then when your body is bigger and can deal with it a little bit better and have a better understanding of it than getting involved in the tackle football.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's something that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about later. Conrad, born in Chicago, I know you played in Wyoming.
Well, I was born in Chicago, but my brother came from a good Polish Catholic family. My brother had asthma, so we moved out to California because for him, and we had a milk distributorship there. And in fact, my 8th grade graduating class was 8 students. A good Catholic school there in 29 Palms, California. And in fact, I never even played any sports until I was a freshman in high school. It was the first time I was ever in a locker room. In fact, I could only make the C basketball team, but I found out that, if I went home right after school, I had to unload trucks because we had a trucking business. So I figured if I got involved in sports, then I could sit there and practice, and the trucks would be unloaded because I had 2 brothers. Well, my dad just left them there until I got done. It didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out, but it turned out okay, and I ended up playing. That's the first time I ever played football is when I was a freshman in high school. And like Trent, I coached at St. Thomas More, my son, all the way through flag football, all the way to tackle football. And my main emphasis for getting involved in it is I didn't want some, and how do you say this politically correct, some father living vicariously through his son that probably could never play in his life. I've had fathers before when a kid was out there and he hit someone and he started to cry because he hurt himself. His dad would yell from the sidelines, "There's no crying in football." I said, "Hey, wait a minute, he's 9 years old. It hurts, let him cry." I said, "I played in the NFL. I cried a couple times on the field." And trust me, let him be a kid.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I got involved in it. And I thought the best thing about it was that I got through all those 8 years with only 1 injury, and it was against it. And we ended up in the city championships a couple times. We didn't win it. In fact, I remember one of the city championships, the last one, my senior year, we had lost, and the team we were playing, the fans in the stands kept saying, "Hold the guy up and take his legs out." And that was kind of upsetting me. And we ended up losing, and that's when I had that 1 injury where a kid got a broken leg, and we're going through shaking hands afterwards, and I get up to their coach and I said, "I ought to take you out to the parking lot and just kick the shit out of you." And I'm thinking, it's 8th grade, Conrad. What are you doing? You want to roll around in the parking lot. And of course, I'm upset about the game. Of course, the kids, in 8th grade, they just looked at you and you know what they said? "Hey, coach, when does basketball start?" So that's as far as that went. But that's the reason I got into it. So to comment on, I think today, the kids today, because there's so much more we know about what goes on with the head and concussions and things of that nature, that there needs to be an open discussion with the kids, not only with the kids, but also with the administration and the coaches on the team to see how they feel about it. And then you can go from there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Carl, you come to this with a very unique perspective, having grown up with 4 boys in Long Beach, California, and you played sports as a young man, then you got into obviously coaching and then the executive side of things.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be involved in the game of football, but also like Trent, basketball and baseball coming through high school in Long Beach, and my brothers also before and after me. Played a little bit in college. I went to West Point for about 18 months, and then I made a decision I wanted to be a football coach rather than a United States military Army officer. I came back to UCLA, played until I hurt my knee, but wanted to go into coaching from the beginning. So I started coaching at the high school level, both at my high school, Long Beach Woodrow Wilson High School in California, and then Loyola High School in Los Angeles, and had great experiences there for about 3 years. Then at a very young age, got to be a head football coach at a California State University, Sonoma State College up in the Napa, Sonoma Wine Valley country. And then I got a call from the alma mater, UCLA, and went back to coach there. I was thrilled about it. With Pepper Rogers, a dear longtime friend Terry Donahue had called me and said, "We've got an opening." And in a couple of years, a guy came in by the name of Dick Vermeil. We won the Rose Bowl, and the next thing I know, I'm on my way to Philadelphia Eagles with Dick Vermeil. And at coaching again the first year, I coached the first year in the NFL, very proud of that, and then got kicked upstairs the second year. We had lost our director of player personnel with the Philadelphia Eagles, and Dick said, "I need somebody in the front office. Will you consider it?" I said, I will. I said, let me think about it. I came back the next morning. He said, what'd you think? I said, you know, Dick, I think I'd rather be the guy that does the hiring and firing than the guy that always gets hired or fired. So Dick said, does that mean you're taking the job? I said, I'm taking the job. He said, you're going to fire me? I said, how can I fire you? You hired me. And then, as it comes full cycle, almost 20 years later, I got to hire the guy that hired me as the president GM of the Kansas City Chiefs to bring Dick Vermeil for his last 5 years in coaching to back to the National Football League and obviously the Kansas City Chiefs. But football has been my life, I think, like all of us here, including yourself, Roger, and it's been great to us. It's evolved into a magnificent game, quite obviously the most popular game in this country. But there are things we need to do, and we're working at it to make it better and safer and more qualitative, particularly when you start at the grassroots level. And I'm involved in that now as the chairman of USA Football. So long-winded story, but I'm happy to be where I'm at. I'm always glad to come back to this great place called Kansas City. It's my pleasure. I appreciate Steve inviting me to do this.
Steve mentioned, I think, in the introduction that I had suffered 5 concussions, 2 in football, 2 in baseball, and one other one where I actually was thrown off a golf cart, of all things.
It's a tough sport. It's a tough sport.
Yeah. Anyway.
I can see how that can happen.
Anyway, you know, knock on wood, I think, you know, I'm doing all right. But it's such a serious thing. And like when you're young, and I go back, I graduated from high school in 1967. I mean, I don't know if we even talked about concussions or knew. You got dinged, or you got woozy, or you got... Trent, I think everybody in Kansas City and probably around the country remembers that day at Arrowhead Stadium in '06 against Cincinnati and that devastating hit that you took, and you were out for 15, 20 minutes. And can you talk about that experience and then the fact that you continued to play football after that, and what went into those decisions, and how your family played into that part? Because I'm sure your wife Julie had, you know, some great things.
She had plenty to say about it. Yeah, she did. Well, yeah, that was obviously a very traumatic injury, and I've got to commend Carl. I have on numerous occasions thanked him for the way that not only he handled it, but the Chiefs organization. And I firmly believe that the protocol that the NFL is using today is a direct reflection of the way that Carl and the Kansas City Chiefs handled my concussion, because I had lengthy discussions with Roger Goodell when I was ultimately got to Miami and then had another concussion there. After my second concussion, had lengthy conversations with Roger Goodell, because at that time there wasn't really a concussion protocol set in place. And I described to him all of the things that Carl and the Chiefs did, how they handed things over to the neurosurgeon, my dealings with neurosurgeons, neurologists, and neuropsychologists during that whole evaluation process. It was a scary time, and until I was completely cleared, there was no way I was going to go back to football, and there was no pressure from an organization standpoint to get back to football. It was more just me, the competitor that I am and was, wanting to get back on the field. And at the time, I was upset with Carl, I was upset with the team, and I was upset with the laundry list of doctors, because I want to get back on the field quicker, and I was passing the tests that at the time were the protocol of getting back on the field. The impact test and some of the minor tests that were used at that time, I was passing all of those tests. And yet the doctors were not giving me the clearance to get back. And that's where, you said my wife Julie, she got involved, and she said, well, listen, you know, the neurosurgeons, neurologists, and neuropsychologists aren't clearing you, so maybe you should just listen to them, because they know a little bit more about it. So I think the education part of it, we're here to talk about education and talk about concussions and the way things are handled, and I think the league has done a good job with that. What the Players Association has afforded the players the ability to go seek outside counsel. Paul Camerata, who is the local neurosurgeon that I dealt with here in Kansas City, he's heavily involved with the new protocol that's going on around the league. And then I went to see Joseph Maroon and Lavelle, who are 2 leading neurosurgeons in the Pittsburgh area, and then eventually got to Bob Cantu, who's in the New England area. I dealt with the guys that were the forefront of their field in dealing with concussions in sport, not only in football, in hockey, in soccer, and in boxing. So for me to come back to the field I had to convince Julie, I had to convince the doctors that I was okay and that I not only passed the tests that were in place, but had to go above and beyond and pass the test that these different doctors had established and is now, protocol in the league.
Roger, real quick on that, and I would first of all salute Dr. John Brown, who was our head orthopedic surgeon, but when this traumatic injury happened, he immediately got to the orthopedic or the neurosurgeon here at St. Luke's, and the whole idea was, let's err on the side of caution. Let's not try to rush this thing back, because it was a very traumatic injury, and I learned a great deal about head traumas from that. Saw a lot of x-rays, saw your brain a few times. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. I think, maybe that was a beginning point for the National Football League to say, look, this is obviously something that we've got to do a better job at. And hopefully a protocol did come out of that that's now, I think, being certainly well instilled in the National Football League. But it also resonates all the way down to the grassroots level and to youth football players. And that's what's key, and I think that's why we're here tonight.
Right. Conrad, we were talking earlier, and you're an offensive lineman. I played offensive line, and usually when you relate concussions to players, it's quarterbacks getting hit. I saw on the screen today that Jason Campbell and Brandon Whedon, both with concussions, won't play this week for Cleveland. We were talking about offensive linemen. We don't necessarily get concussions because we're not running in the open field and getting hit by somebody like that, but on every play, you're getting hit. And do you recall going back in your career, the discussion amongst the players about head trauma, concussions? Was it an issue back in your day?
Well, I think Carl will agree with me, and I don't know if it was around when you played, Trent, but we never heard the word concussion. We never heard it till probably 10 years ago. People started talking about concussions in the NFL. They were dings, you clear your head up, you get some smelling salts, you go back out. It was no big deal. The word concussion was never, ever brought up. Concussions to us was like someone being knocked out cold in an automobile accident or something. That was what we considered a concussion, not just getting knocked dizzy and stuff.
Well, you guys were probably on the sidelines. Man, I hit him so hard I saw spots, or I saw I saw stars, and that was. But those were never really considered concussions.
No, they were never considered concussions. And like I said, as an offensive lineman, we ran about 60 plays a game. And we play, and that's not even counting practice. So every play you're banging heads. And even today they talk about today why do they have so many injuries in the NFL today? Well, first of all, you got to understand the body's not made to carry 310 pounds, 325 pounds. These guys can step on another guy's foot and tear their knee up just by getting off balance a little bit. And not only that, but physics just tells you the force of a 350-pound guy running into another 350-pound guy is a lot more dangerous than a 185-pound guy running into a 185-pound guy. You see a lot of those Hollywood hits you see on TV and stuff, on ESPN and things of that nature. If you watch most of them, usually the guy giving the hit is hitting his own player. and those are just, so a lot of times they blame the players for putting out those vicious hits and things of that nature. But again, you and I were talking in the back room. I said, I think the networks have the blame too. They have ESPN, the greatest hits. I mean, that's what sells tickets. That's what it is, a pugilistic type sport, and that's just the way it is.
Well, television certainly is at fault to a great extent. There's no doubt about it, because it's highlight reel stuff. And until you see the severity of it and understand the severity of it, then you realize this is nothing to be gloating over. It's nothing to be proud of, really. Sometimes in sports, and it's not just football, but every contact sports, things are going to happen that sometimes you don't have control over. And those things are going to happen. But I guess, Carl, where we see, and we were talking about this earlier today, and I've been watching.
Can I interrupt you for one second?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to ask Carl something. When you were looking for that special teams player, were you looking for a guy that was a headhunter that ran down there and jumped in the pile, or a guy that ran down there with his hands out, whoop, don't hit me, takes a hell of an athlete to run through 22 people and miss them all.
You're always looking for that impact player.
You're looking for,
without question. But
the guy that stands out. That's what we're talking about.
And a lot of guys made the NFL because that's what they did on special teams. They made big plays, if not returning, also then making tackles. But you were going to
So I apologize for
No, that's all right. That's fine. But just to follow up on that a little bit, too, is that when you go into the game, you understand there are going to be injuries. I don't think when you suited up, when we all did, we understood. I don't think any of us understood head injuries. I think we all understood we got our ankles taped. Some of us had to get our knees taped. We taped our finger,
You always played with the same thing the military did with, and I don't want to equate football to war, but you always had to believe in the back of your mind that that happens to the other guy. It doesn't happen to me.
Right, but that was never a conscious thing, and nobody really ever addressed it. Whereas I think today we're finally dealing with this, and kids at a young age, and I know, Trent, your son plays high school football, they have tests now that they give these kids on a constant basis, and probably we ought to be testing, because the point is you get hit in practice. It's not just games, but practice you're getting hit too. And to have that line there so that you understand where that individual is and where they should be, and if there is a problem, let's err on the side of caution.
Well, and it's not just that test. That test then is an important part of it, but there's the cognitive, the neurological, the balance, and you've got to have someone with the presence to understand what those things are, and that's got to be your trainer or a team doctor if you're a school that has a team doctor. Ultimately, the education comes down to the player, the coach, and the parent. You hope that a trainer or doctor is aware of those things, but I think that's where USA Football, and I've had a conversation with Carl about this in the past, I think USA Football has done a tremendous job. As you said, I have a son that's a junior in high school and an 8th grade son that played. I coach both of them in youth football. Now with USA Football, if you're, depending on the league you're in, but I recommend it for all the leagues, if you're going to be a coach, in order to get approved to be on the sideline to coach that team, you have to go on to USA Football and get certified. And to get certified, you have to sit there and watch videos. You have to watch, you take a test after each video on proper tackling, proper blocking, proper fundamentals of throwing, running back. They give you coaching drills. There's all these things. And why all the leagues, the youth football leagues, don't follow that same protocol, I'm not sure. It just so happens the league that we were involved in, you had to, even me, I played 15 years in the NFL, and here I am watching a video on 45 minutes on proper blocking, proper throwing mechanics, drills to use. But I was sitting, the whole time I was sitting there watching it, I was thinking how great this is for, as you said, the fathers that are trying to live vicariously through their kids. They're sitting there saying, you know what? When I was growing up, it's rub some dirt on it. Let's put the screws on them. Well, that was the old saying. You guys remember, put the screws on them because that was the part of the helmet that you want. That is not the technique now. So by watching this tape, those guys, it brings awareness and education to them. And I think that's where it all starts. The youth football all the way up through, and eventually, that'll be a protocol around, for everybody.
Right, and the thing is, in this day and age, defensive players, they don't tackle anymore, they hit.
Right.
And so, Carl, that's something I know USA Football has been working on.
Yeah. First of all, USA Football is a not-for-profit organization that was founded 10 years ago by both the NFL Players Association, Gene Upshaw, and the NFL, at that time, Paul Tagliabue. I was on the NFL Youth Football Funding Board and saw it from the beginning. 10 years later, I'm leaving in the Chiefs. We lost our chairman, Jack Kemp, who'd done a great job, and Roger asked me if I'd step in and take over. I said, I can't replace Jack Kemp, but I'll certainly do what I can. It's a not-for-profit organization based in Indianapolis, Indiana. 55 full-time people. We've got an outstanding executive director, Scott Hallenbeck. But the goal is very simplistically, make the game more qualitative, make it safer, and for parents and youth football coaches, administrators, referees, players, let's give them everything they need to be successful, but also, as Trent said, but to standardize the game. There are 4 million youth football players, 4.5, from the ages 6 years old through 19, through high school. 3 million between 6 years old and 14. There's almost 10,000 leagues of youth football players, from Pop Warner to Police Athletic League to Boys and Girls Clubs to a lot of independent youth football leagues. But there was no standardization of coaches. And like you said, what the obvious was, we'd see guys that shouldn't be coaching and were teaching techniques and not even teaching techniques, simply doing slamming drills into each other, didn't understand the importance of teaching it properly at an early age. Heads Up Football is a program that we started a year ago, or less than a year ago, with the NFL. And we thought we were going to do 300 youth football leagues this last year, 2013. We did 1,800 youth football leagues with the Heads Up Football program. That was about 600,000 kids and 65,000 youth football coaches. Basically and succinctly, we're trying to change, I don't like the word, but the culture of the game. Number one, it begins with proper tackling techniques. Conrad, you're right. When I taught tackling, it was always lead with your head. You know, where your head goes, your body will follow. That has got to be eliminated. And I know Roger at the league level, at the NFL level, is trying to do it, adamantly trying to do it, because, as you said, many times, not only the guy getting hit, but the guy doing the hitting was hurting himself also. So we have a proper five-stage tackling technique that every player, coach, parent has to go through. We have a player safety coach for every single youth football league. But other things that coaches couldn't even think about before: concussion awareness. What is a concussion? What are the symptoms of a concussion? What does a young man look like if he's been knocked dizzy? It's no longer, well, just, you know, clear your head and get back in the game. No, once you've been hit, when in doubt, you sit him out, and he doesn't go back until he is, or she, girls do play some tackle football in this country, but they have to be cleared by a specialist, a neurologist, someone that understands what a concussion is. Another aspect that people forget about is proper helmet and shoulder pad fitting. Most youth football coaches don't know anything on how to do it. You know, the equipment guys at the NFL level know how to do it. They know exactly what they have to do. The other aspects of it are so important. The coach's certification. If you're a youth parent, youth football player parent, and your kid is being coached by someone that's not certified, you are taking a big chance, and you shouldn't, and it's not necessary to do that. We try to facilitate all the youth football leagues in this country. We don't try to run them, we being USA Football. We try to give them everything they need to be successful. I would really advocate, and I preach this, but go to usafootball.com. You'll see the things that Trent's talking about. For coaches, they've got practice plans, game plans, how to do it. We found out, and we're doing some major research now, a 2-year study with about 6,000 youth football players on how many injuries do they sustain and what kind of injuries do they have. Frankly, concussions are not a youth football sport problem. They are a youth problem, youth sport problem, all of them. The largest number of concussions per capita in youth sports is girls basketball. You're not going to read that or know that unless you get to the research, but it's true. The girls, they don't have any protection, they bang heads, they go down on a hardwood floor. All sports need to know about it. And obviously, people that are following us now are USA Lacrosse, USA Hockey. Anytime there's a contact sport, they want to know what's happening. And we're very proud of what our people have been able to do. But we have to do so much more. And it's basically research, more information, and you know, it won't be solved today, it won't be solved tomorrow, but I think we can change the culture of our sport enough that the safety issue comes back as the mainstream, as the most important aspect of it. You know, you're right. Two 60-pound guys running into each other cannot make the collision that the National Football League players can make it at 300 pounds. But at the end of the day, we want all of our kids that are involved in USA Football, Heads Up Football, to have a great experience, and most importantly, and for their parents, a safe experience.
Trent, let's talk about player responsibility at the professional level, because we watch the NFL. The players are so big, they're so fast. The game moves at warp speed at times, and they've put some provisions in to protect the quarterback. But I'm just curious, did you ever talk to your teammates if you saw a guy that you felt like, man, this guy's always leading with his head. He's always sort of that guy that's, you know, he's hitting somebody and he's hitting them in the head. And at some point in time, do players talk to players and go, dude, you got to stop doing that. You're not only, you know, for his sake, but for your sake too.
Well, you're definitely aware of it when it's happening on the other team. You know, for me, in throwing to my receivers, there were always certain defensive players that you had to protect them a little bit more with the passes. You didn't want to hang them out to dry and then know that you know, put them that much more susceptible to injury. As far as, you know, as far as your own team, usually, you know, that would have to go to whoever that position coach or players within that group. You know, I guess I never really felt it was my place to go over to the defensive guys and say, hey, by the way, you know, I was worried more on my offensive, my guys on my side of the ball. But you definitely were aware of, you know, the guys around the league that, you know, you had to be more aware of.
But like Conrad, we were talking like in baseball, if a pitcher's going to throw at somebody's head, you know there's going to be payback coming that next inning.
Right.
And I would think in football, there's got to be the same thing.
Well, as an offensive line in St. Louis, we had a pretty good offensive line, and we played some great teams, and we had a lot of fun doing it. But if you were going to mess with one of our quarterbacks or Terry Metcalf or something of that nature, we kind of policed it ourselves. If you were man enough to give a cheap shot, you better be man enough to take it. You know, and the thing is, it's not like we had a bounty system, even though I'm going to write New Orleans, I think they owe me money. But we certainly looked, we didn't get paid for it, but we certainly looked those guys up and said, hey, you're going to mess with Terry Metcalf, you're going to mess with Jim Hart and stuff, well, then we're going to mess with you. And basically that meant when, you know, after we released the ball and stuff, offensive linemen, we don't have a lot to do, but we can find that defensive lineman and earhole him. And, you know, once he gets knocked on his butt 4 or 5 times, 6, 7 times a game by just standing around, he kind of slows down a little bit. He kind of gets the message.
Right.
Well, I have to interject. I was with the Philadelphia Eagles and a young assistant coach. We played the St. Louis Cardinals, and good offensive line. They had a great offensive line. Dan Dierdorf, the other 4 guys were great. You know, this guy was okay, but the other 4 were great players.
Tom Banks, Roger Finney, Bob
Banks.
Young.
Yeah. We had a nose tackle, Charlie Johnson. We played a 30 front, and Charlie was creating havoc with the backfield, particularly your quarterback, Jim Hart. And all of a sudden, and I know they got together on this, Banks was the center. He pulled out, so Charlie thinks he's coming in free, and he starts coming to the quarterback, and the 2 guards, including you and who the other guy, they high-load him, and he was done for the day. And it slowed down the rush, I'll guarantee you that. But that type of football is part of the game, but I think, you know, what you're getting to, Roger, I think today you may see more of even teammates going to their teammates and saying, look, that type of play is not what we want. Number one, if in the NFL, if he does it enough, he's going to be suspended. Right. And now he really hurts his team because he's losing a starting player. He's going to sit down for a game or 2 or 5 or whatever it might be. But that probably has to come from within also, particularly certainly at the top level, at the NFL level, to say, hey guys, we're all teammates here. And I think you brought it up. You don't see those types of hits in practice with your own teammates. And, you know, they're all in this game to win, but
are we
purposely hurting somebody is not
something. Let me ask you this, Trent, wouldn't you feel a little bit intimidated about telling your offensive lineman, hey, wait a minute, you're being a little bit too rough on those guys out there. Why don't you let up on them? They'll look at you and say, well, then you got to take your licks too, man.
Right. No, I would never say that.
But you'd probably say...
Well, then we have a problem there then,
But you'd
Carl.
probably tell your offensive line after you've been sacked about 5 times, could somebody please find a block somewhere?
Yeah, you definitely want to be, you know, be aware of that. And along the lines of what Carl's saying, you know, not only the suspensions that could potentially happen and why players, but now with the fines that are being levied, you know, that's a pretty significant thing. And that gets everybody's attention when you start getting into the 5- and 6-figure fines. That's going to make guys change the way they play.
Let me ask the 3 of you this question. Are quarterbacks being protected enough, or some would say they're being protected too much? Conrad?
Well, you know, I'm a tough guy to ask that question to, because we went through a season with only allowing 7 sacks, and one of them was against our field goal kicker who got sacked on a bad snap, so we weren't even in the game, and another one was a back that forgot to pick up. So we went through an entire season with only allowing 5 sacks. In fact, we played the first 7 games without allowing a sack. So to me to say, is the quarterback being harassed that much? We didn't want anyone to touch the quarterback at all. Now today, I think it would be, personally myself, I think it would be very difficult to play defense. When do you actually pull up and not hit him because you just busted your ass to get past that guy who's been punching you in the stomach, leg whipping you, hitting you in the throat and stuff like that? You finally get by him, you get a chance to hit the quarterback, and it's just that split second before he throws the ball. You got to make that decision, do I hit him or not? And if I do hit him, am I going to be flagged? It's a tough position for the defensive lineman to be played, but they deserve it.
As a quarterback, you know, I feel like they're doing some good things with the rules. I think that where there's a lot of gray area is just the rules and the interpretation of the rule, and every official that's back there, the one that's in charge of the quarterback area, they've all got varying opinions. They're told what the framework of the rule is, but what's a penalty to one official is not a penalty to another official. And yeah, if you're aiming at his chest, but then right at the last second, the quarterback ducks his head, and then it becomes a helmet to helmet. Or, you know, if you're getting blocked to the ground and you hit them low, then it's, you know, you're going at their knee. I mean, that's where a lot of the gray are. And the same thing, you know, we can switch this around to the receivers and the defensive backs. The guys that are in the backfield calling a pass interference. You can see it every weekend. Guys are forearm, arm bars, shoving, boom. Okay, why was that one called and the other one wasn't called? So the same thing goes along with the quarterback. I just think that there has to be more of a universal understanding, because I think a lot of us as fans watching the game now, you get really frustrated when there's a really cheap, you know, someone kind of pushes them and then you see the NBA flop. I think you're going to see some flop rules come into play. I think you're going to see some of the NBA stuff where, you know, the quarterbacks that do the flop, or the lineman by the pile that gets peeled back and does a flop. You know, I think you're going to see some, that's going to be addressed by the competition committee, is the flopping part of it, because there's some penalties right now that are being called just because there's too much of a gray area. And, you know, that'll have to be worked out.
And in truth, if you watch a game, and I think we'd all agree, I think every single person on the field on any given play could be called for a penalty for something.
No question.
Yeah.
You could call holding on every. You could call holding
on every single play.
And you held on every.
Oh, I could have played against you without shoulder pads.
Guys, I want to get your thoughts on this, because this, of course, was the big news this summer when the NFL reached the agreement, $765 million settlement with more than 4,500 former NFL players. The NFL said they long denied any wrongdoing, insisted the safety's always been a top priority. Roger Goodell at the time told pro football's lawyers to do the right thing for the game and the men who played it. Conrad, you've had a long-going, not the head injury, the dementia, the Alzheimer's, all that, but with player disabilities. You've had numerous, obviously, knee operations and such, but what was your feeling about the settlement? Was it a good thing for the players? Was it?
Well, first of all, 6 out of 10 players have opted out of that settlement. So consequently, that tells you a little bit something about it. I've had 9 total knee replacement surgeries. I just had my shoulder replaced 2 weeks ago. There'll probably be more surgery. I don't have a lot more to replace, but you know, other than that, there'll be more of it. And when you peel back the layers of that onion there, that $780-something million, it's only $20 million a team per team over 13, 14 years. And not only that, but the funding they have now for head injuries and for the heart and for diabetes and things of that nature, they fund that out of their pocket now. They said, well, we're not going to fund that anymore. We're going to use that $780 million to fund that. So they just took money out of one pot and moved it over here and put it out of the funding on the lawsuit, if the lawsuit actually goes through, because it has not even been approved yet by the judges of the court. Will any player ever see that? No. The players that will see it are the ones that are in nursing homes, the people that can't think, can't feed themselves or anything else. They'll get it, and it's too bad that they missed out on the quality of life for 20 years before they have it. My biggest gripe is one simple thing. I own a business. I'm in the healthcare business. A lot of you all out there are in businesses. When you have employees get hurt, you take care of them. You made money off those employees. They got hurt on the job, working for you to earn you a nice living. Not a Learjet like the owners, but a nice living. And you took care of them. Well, why should the NFL be exonerated from that? I mean, you have employees that you've made a lot of money off of. If they get hurt, you certainly have to take care of them. You shouldn't have to put it on the back of the taxpayers, the same people that pay $10 $10 for a beer, $30 to park a car, and $150 to go see a game, and then you're going to say, hey, take care of our employees because we don't want to. That's the only problem I have. If you have a player that's injured and needs help, you take care of them. You don't put a bunch of window dressing out there. I think what they're doing with youth football and stuff, because football is a fabulous sport, I think it teaches a lot more than just the hitting and the grinding and the winning and the losing. It teaches you how to work together as teams. It teaches you a little bit about discipline. It teaches you a lot about life that you should have. And it also teaches you that, you know, it's not that, you don't have to back down. It's not that tough to take a punch in the face. It's not going to kill you. So you got to stand up for your rights sometime. I've always told my wife's always thought I was crazy because I wanted all my boys to get punched in the face once. Let them know that it's not going to kill you. So you don't have to take a bunch of crap from somebody if you don't want to. Of course, none of them ever took me up on my advice, but I tried. You know, I wanted to let them know, man. If you get pushed to it, let them hit you in the face. It's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna kill you. We can take care of that. So the thing is, that's what I push for. Is that the NFL is certainly got to do their part, just like everybody else in the public, just like every taxpayer. We shouldn't have to pay for, you know, the damaged players that they've put out there. They made a lot of money off of it, and God bless them, they should, because they took a lot of risk at the beginning. And it's a great sport, and the public pays for it, and you got to take care of your employees. I do. Every other person that owns a business has to. Why shouldn't they?
Well, I think I'd agree. You made the statement, 6 out of the 10 opted out of the lawsuit?
Yes.
You mean they were in it and then they pulled out?
No, we had the opportunity to opt out.
Okay.
Okay? So I think there's about 4,500 in it, and the last thing I read, it was 6 out of 10, or maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's 4 out of 6, but
Right.
I think it was 6 out of 10 have opted out. So it really hasn't been passed yet by the judge, and I think it's in Minneapolis,
Yeah, I
the
don't know where it
judges,
is.
and
Yeah.
because we have the opportunity to opt out, and the NFL has been sending us numerous emails on why we should vote for it. But they said in the lawsuit that they didn't have to admit any damage. They didn't have to admit that they hid the fact that about concussions. Of course, like I said, concussions were never even mentioned. You know, I never heard the word concussion before in my life while I was playing. So there's a lot of things that they put in there, and like I said, there's a lot of layers to that onion there on it. When you start pulling them back, Joe Public, when you say $780 million, man, that sounds like, whoo, man, these guys really lucked up. No one's going to see a penny. But hopefully some of the people that really need the help, that their family can't put them in those homes and stuff, will get it.
Yeah. I haven't been involved in the NFL for the last 4 years, and you know, candidly, I thought the reason that they decided to solve the case, if you will, or agree to arbitration and an agreement was that those players who needed it the most would be able to get money quickly and rapidly, you know, once it is approved. I don't know all the nuances of it. I would say that from where I stand or used to stand, the NFL owners, starting with the commissioner and the league office, recognize that today, that just what you said. And I think are making strides, are trying to help those players that, number one, need it, and the ones that are obviously going to need it at some point. But it's a major problem. It's not going to go away. The elephant in the room has been the concussion awareness, trauma, head trauma injuries in that. And I think the NFL is working hard to try to solve those problems if they can. Yes, maybe for some after the fact, but the other side of it is where I am involved in the grassroots, we're trying to change the culture of the game because, Conrad, you're right, and I obviously speak from a very biased position, but I think all 4 of us here who played the game and coached it say the same thing. The positives of this game called football so far outweigh the negatives. It's like you said, it's accountability, it's responsibility, it's discipline. And whether a youth football player plays 1 year or 4 years or 10 years, I think what they gain from that, it's an experience that you can't do, I don't think, in other sports, even other team sports. So my bias is I certainly don't want to see the game go away. I want to see it grow and become more qualitative and safer.
And I don't either. I think there's any man out there would think that when you're 21 years old, you know, we all think we're the best looking guy in the bar, we're bulletproof, and we tell the best jokes. So, I mean, you think you're invincible, that nothing's going to happen to you, that's going to happen to the other guy.
Right, go ahead. Well, I just think, and I agree with Conrad, that I think there needs to be a process in place to where former players can be helped out more quickly than what's going on. There's a process now, and you have to go through different doctors, and then you have to go to another doctor, and then you have to get another evaluation, and then you go in front of a committee, and then they decide, okay, is he getting partial disability, full disability, what's going on with those things? Where I have a disagreement with the lawsuit and a disagreement with the ultimate settlement is that the basis of the lawsuit was that the league was hiding what was going on. The league knew about concussions and the long-term effects of concussions, and that they were hiding it from the players. The reason I disagree with that is when I went through mine in 2006 here in Kansas City, as I mentioned, Paul Camerata here in town, Bob Cantu, who's one of the heads of the CTE study based out of Boston, Maroon and Lavelle, the guys in Pittsburgh, these guys were all at the forefront, and that's why I went to see them. At that time in 2006, everything that I was getting told in Kansas City was the same thing that these leading neurosurgeons and neurologists around the country were telling me. So I didn't feel like the team was hiding anything, and that was in 2006. So to say that, you know, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, that the league knew about stuff, and yet these neurosurgeons or neurologists didn't know about it. That's where I had a problem with some of it. I do believe that there are players that need to be taken care of more quickly. John Mackey. I mean, there's a laundry list of players, not just John, but a laundry list of players that are dealing with Alzheimer's, dealing with dementia, and whether or not that ties into the concussions. I just don't think the league was hiding the fact that concussions. I just don't think the knowledge was there, whether it be in football or other walks of life either.
Well, it might have not been there, but they knew there was something that certainly should have been looked into. For an example, I remember when I got out of the league, and correct me if I'm wrong on the dates, I think he had 12 years to file for a disability through the NFL. I'm not talking about workers' comp, I'm talking about disability. And so I started about my 8th year. Okay, and I went to one doctor, and he said up in, I think I might have been living in Laramie, and he said that I was disabled. They said, okay, fine. They tabled it for a year. They said, well, we want you to see this other doctor. So I saw these other doctors. I had to travel to St. Louis to see them. And they said I was disabled. So they tabled that for another 2 years. Now, I only had 12 years, right? So now another year goes by. They say, we want you to fly into New York to see our doctor. Well, in between that, I had to have one knee replaced. Which I had to pay for myself. The NFL has paid for none of my surgeries. I've paid for them all myself. So I had the knee replaced and stuff, and the guy said, yes, he was probably disabled, but now that he has his knee replaced, he's not totally disabled. And they tabled that. And they came back to me, and I finally said, so where are we? They said, you're past your 12 years. I ran out of time, and I said, well, I started 8 years ago. Right. And that's the games they played. In fact, Jerry Spence, the fantastic attorney with the Silkwood case, he lives in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. He was friends of mine. He said, let me just show you something. He called the NFL. Now, this is Jerry Spence. He's written 8 or 9 books. He's one of the best trial lawyers ever in the United States of America, been written up in every law review magazine around. He called the NFL, and he called the NFLPA, and we were put on hold and transferred around for 45 minutes, and he never talked to anyone. And that's Jerry Spence. I mean, that was like, you know,
That was both the NFLPA and the NFL.
And the league that just kept transferring. And he hung the phone up and he says, once you quit playing, that just proves you how much help you're going to get from either one of them.
Well, and along those same lines, and I agree, and that's why I said there's got to be a better process with the permanent and partial disability, going through that, getting the players the funds they need so they can have the knee replacement, so they can have a quality of life that they should have. Along those same lines, in 1999 when I was with the Rams, player dove into my knee, blew out my knee, missed that season. I am still going through the workman's comp with the Rams. They are still contending with that. And that was in 1999, and I filed it within the allotted time of a couple years, and it's still in court, and they're still contending. Well, we don't feel like we have. I'm like, you know, and now today's day and age, everybody saw it. It's not like, I mean, everybody saw it. It's on TV. I mean, so yes, the process is completely out of whack, whether it be workman's comp, permanent disability.
Well, who fixes the process?
Pardon? I'm sorry.
Who fixes that process?
Well, I don't know if that process, because, you know,
Is that a league players
serious.
association?
That's gotta be between the league
Yeah,
and-
let's be very serious with, and on it. You know it's a business, okay? And for a big business of that nature, with the type of liability it may have out there, for them to spend $20 to $30 million a year with putting things back to the future is money well spent. Because if they had solved it then, they may have to spend $35, $40 million a year, each year. So as long as we can spend $20 million and put off eventually when we lose, we're making tons of money. And that's just business. Yeah. I mean, I don't hold that against them for being business. I do hold it against them that they think you, Joe Public, should pay for their, for their injured employees.
We're going to take questions from the audience. Steve, maybe you can get that set up and ready to go. I want real quick, though, just Carl, if there's one thing, and then Trent and Conrad, one thing, if you were the commissioner, if you could change going forward, what would be the one thing that you would like to see changed in the NFL?
Well, I think Roger's already doing it. Again, I'm speaking from where I'm at today in grassroots football.
Just a fan. I mean, if there's anything that you would like to see about the game that you think would make it better or help it?
Well, we talked about making it a bigger field because the field has stayed the same size, 100 yards by 53 and a half, and the players get bigger, stronger, and faster every year. And where do they go and hide? We talked about, when I was with the league, actually considering, like the CFL, making it 120 yards, making it 65 yards wide. Would that help possibly make it safer, reduce injuries? I don't know, but it's interesting, and it's forbearing, frankly, that every year these guys do get bigger and stronger and faster, and we're still playing on the same size football field that can possibly create more injuries.
Trent?
I think continuation of what the league's trying to do with safety. I think it makes it, there's certain players in certain aspects that are talking about, it's affecting the game and affecting the excitement of the game, and fans aren't. The ratings that are at an all-time high, the attendance is at an all-time high. I guess a little bit off topic that I would change is I think the ticket prices, and I know from an owner's standpoint, you're trying to make as much.
I never raise prices.
What I'm saying is
yeah.
I just remember as a kid going to watch I grew up in St. Louis, so going to watch the Cardinals play at Old Busch Stadium.
Who's your favorite player when you were growing up in St. Louis?
Had to be if you're the quarterback.
Yeah, I was going to say, Eddie Lineman, yes. Eddie Lineman.
That'd be your answer.
Linemen have always been my best friends.
Kim Hart was
those are the
probably
guys,
the guy.
Casey Wigman, Will Shields, Willie Rofe, those are my guys. That's Brian Watt, those are my guys. I always made sure I took care of them. So linemen have always been important to me. But I think, growing up in St. Louis, and we didn't come from a lot of money, but those 1 or 2 times a year where we could afford to get a ticket to go down and enjoy the game, I know it's a money business. I know you're trying to get as much as you can from TV revenues and parking and everything else, but I think as commissioner, appeal to all the owners and say, listen, a portion of the stands has to be this price range so that people can go see the game. I mean, it's a different experience. I know
it's become a corporate game in a lot of ways.
Well, it is. It's more suit and ties now.
High definition TVs and direct TV and all those things. I mean, and those are all great things. It's made the game what it is today and the money for everybody what it is today. But I just think at a certain level, you have to, watching a game in person for everybody is a great experience. So.
Conrad, real quickly, what is the nicest thing a quarterback ever did for you?
The nicest thing a quarterback has ever done.
Yeah, one of your
me?
quarterbacks. Yeah.
Well, they usually always took us out.
With only 7 sacks in a season. You got a dinner.
Five. Didn't you hear him? He said 5.
He should have bought us Rolex watches, but then again, he was only, he was only making what Trent made in 1 snap. Trent makes about 100,000 a snap. He was only making 100,000 a year. Yeah. So
the funny thing is
there's the difference. You got to understand one thing. You look at the salaries, and the average amount of time you play out there is 60 plays. You add that up times snap. I was watching a game in St. Louis. Tom Conrad was sitting next to me. He said, "You see that right guard?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "He makes $7,000 every time they snap the ball." I said, "Hell, I could have played 2 downs and been done for the year." You know, what you would make the game safer is get rid of the AstroTurf. The AstroTurf was not put in there to make the game faster or something like that. It was put in there to make the game easier to maintain, less money to spend maintaining it, and it looked better for television. And the equipment didn't get damaged as much. So that's one thing I would do. The other thing I would do, too, is most of the injuries that happen and really cripple the people up, and this is bad, they're making enough money now that they should be able to put enough away. But it's cumulative injuries. It's the injuries on top of the injuries you've had. So if you have an injury, which is dedicated to a group of physicians, I don't care if you're Roger Staubach or if you're the lowest guy on the totem pole, after 4 or 5 years, you put a limit on how long you can play, and that's it. And I'll tell you the truth, the players are going to hate it at that particular time, but they're going to love it when they're 60, 65.
Great. All right, Steve, we got questions from...
A little bit of time for some Q&A. We've got microphones set up at the end of both aisles here, and we would ask you to just come to the microphone. Thanks.
I need this lowered. I work in neuropsychology, and you just brought me into this question. So we see a lot of high school kids who have already had 1, if not more, concussions. A lot of times soccer, not even football. But a lot of times it's the parents who don't want to pull them out of sports because they want them to get a scholarship. They want them to go pro. Carl, what would your chance of hiring someone who's had already 2 knee injuries and 4 concussions, how hireable are they?
Candidly, it's something you look at the injury history of any player coming out for the draft, and if they've had a lot of them, you don't want to take that chance because it is a very physical game, particularly at the NFL level as well as the college level, and they're not going to stay too long. Your point is well taken, though. You know, one of the things that we do fight is, hey, your son's got a concussion, we're going to sit him out, and some parents say, no, you're not. He's going to get back in there and play, and that's not what you want. You know, the welfare of the youth football player should come first and foremost, and even sometimes parents say, no, we don't want that to happen.
Well, and along those same lines, that's, I think, going to ultimately be the biggest problem that you have to solve. And at the NFL level, you're talking about hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. So if a guy is dinged or sees stars or whatever, the chances of that guy telling his trainer, his coach, they're just not going to do it because they know from a personnel standpoint, listen, they're putting a laundry list together.
Our slogan was, you can't make the tub in a club. You can't make the club in a tub.
So that's the biggest challenge for the NFL. Now, taking it down to college and high school level, that's where you get into it. You get into the high school, okay, it's going to affect my scholarship, so I can't report it because college is going to find out. College, I can't report it because then it's going to affect my draft status. You know, professionally, I can't affect it because I'm getting ready for free agency and they can't know about it. So that's where I think the biggest hurdle is.
You know, and I think as far as the the baseline for the brain scans right now are very, very important for people that are just beginning to play the sport. Right now, what they're doing the baseline for the NFL players, most of them are damaged already. So, I mean, what is that baseline going to tell you? They should have had it done 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The United States Soccer Federation has a licensing program where you get a C, B, or A license, and it's a week of intensive training and then a written and a field test. And do you have anything that's that intense?
Well, yes, it's a certification, coach's certification, and it's actually specific to age groups, 6 to 8, 9 to 11, 13, because you can't try to teach a 7-year-old kid or a 12-year-old kid a 3-point stance if they're physically not able to get into it. And that is absolutely part of the certification course that the youth football coaches that sign up with USA Football must pass.
Yes, ma'am.
Interesting discussion. I'm a retired public health nurse and spent a great deal of my career trying to prevent injury and promote health. So I applaud the efforts, particularly for youth, because I truly believe that the culture and social change are going to happen with youth, probably not our players. And Trent made an interesting point about the pressure that our young people feel with scholarships, and parents, of course, buy into that as well. My question for Carl, more than anyone else, is what efforts are you making for young people to tell the truth about their physical symptoms? Because by Trent's own admission, he was ready to get back in there. And the Kansas City Star had a recent article about a young gal, a teenage girl, who lied to her mom and to her physician about the symptoms she was having, and now has permanent neurological problems. And I believe she was a basketball player at the time. So where's this permission giving to really affect a true cultural change with our young people to take better care of themselves? Thank you.
It's a very good point. We hopefully are starting to make some inroads with the youth football coaches that winning is not the most important thing. Maybe at the NFL level, but not there. You know, the health and safety of your players is the most important thing. And specific to the player himself, they have to, like you say, come to the conclusion that, you know, I am dizzy, I'm not focusing, things are not quite the same. The education that we try to give on concussion awareness is essential, because not even the football coach at the youth level can really recognize that. He's with that player maybe 3-4 hours a week of practice. The parents have to be also aware and the symptoms of that. And when the football player goes home, he tries to do his homework, he's not focusing on it, whatever and so forth, they have to be cognizant of that and report that, and not be afraid to not want to do that. It is a culture change. You know, for so many years in our game, it was, you know, well, you've got to be tough to play football. But I've seen neurologists say, you've got to be tough to play football, but you know what? Your brain is not tough. And you've got to be smart enough to recognize when things aren't right and sit out. And like we always said, if when in doubt, you sit them out and they don't come back until they are absolutely cleared by a specialist. In 49 states now, there's something called the Leistig Law, which is out of the University of Washington. Dr. Stan Herring, who's the head of our medical advisory board, started this some years ago. Unfortunately, a youth football player was put back into a game. They lost him. Stan was adamant about, we've got to change this, made it a state law, passed there today through the efforts of the NFL, the NFLPA, USA Football. 49 states have now adopted that. And you're coaching youth football, you're liable if you put this young man back into the game and he's still injured. So hopefully we're making inroads there, but it's going to take time, and it's an education process. Concussion awareness for parents, coaches, players, administrators is essential.
I think the one thing, too, is if you have a baseline on every player, you take it out of their hands.
Yep.
If it's off, I don't have to make the decision. That's where it is, because you're never going to change the culture of the young guy that wants to play football and wants to get back into the game, because to play at any level, you have to have that competitive nature. If you don't, then you're sitting on the bench, and that's a tough thing to sit there and say, we got to change the culture. And personally, I don't want to see that culture change. I want to see a guy that wants to be in on the action.
Yeah. Well, we talk about culture change, and that is an important aspect of it. The player has to be aware, the coach, the parents, those things. It also has to be the other players that are on the team, that they're maybe going to open up a little bit more to those players. I remember, and it wasn't Kansas City, but one of the teams I was on in the NFL, a player came off the sideline and said, wow, man, I really got my bell rung, and I don't even remember that play. I just came off the line of scrimmage and was like looking, and I saw it was a handoff, and so I went and did. And so I went up to our, and everybody could clearly see that this player was knocked pretty good. So when he came off the field, the doctors, trainers, everybody talked to him. Then he left, and I ended up talking to him at a separate time. So I went up to the trainers and doctors. I said, listen, this is what he told me. He said he doesn't remember the play. These are the things. They're like, okay, we'll check into it. Then all of a sudden I see him go back on the field. I go over to the trainer and the doctor, and I was like, what happened? They go, well, he answered all of our questions correctly. He said that this. I said, yeah, but he told me specifically that he didn't remember the play and didn't understand what was going on. It took him, you know, but that's, once again, that's the culture of, Well, we talked to him, and everything he said passed along. So here I thought I was trying to do something to help him out, and I still believe I did the right thing by doing it. It's just, once again, that culture that we talk about.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, and this is a wonderful program that you're putting on. I'm a high school football coach. I just finished my 46th year at it, so
Congratulations.
I've seen thanks. I've seen a lot of advancement in this area. For example, our helmets that we use currently that Riddell has have sensors in them. Our trainer can monitor on the sideline. We do have a doctor at every game. We also have a doctor quite often at practice, as well as our trainer is very well versed in this. We do the baseline when they're freshmen when they come in. So it's a lot different than when I started playing in the late 50s myself and wore the suspension helmet, Riddell suspension helmet. So I do think that things are greatly improving in this area. And I do think it's important that the NFL take the lead in this. I think Carl's program is a wonderful idea because for years as a coach, I've seen some of the people that in youth football probably didn't have the right knowledge and certainly not the right kind of certification to be teaching kids the basics. I also kind of really agreed with what Conrad said earlier about the media has some of the blame, because I can remember when I first started, we were taught to tackle with our shoulders, not put our head in, things that really heads up is being taught now. We're taught when I started playing in the 1950s and as a youth. And I do think the greatest hits, those kind of movies that was put out by NFL Films, probably led to kids leading with their head a lot more. And I do think that that's one of the reasons that these concussions and other injuries spiraled upward. So I think more awareness on the national level that you don't tackle with your head, you don't stick your head in there, was helpful to not only the players but to the coaches. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Appreciate your comment.
In fact, I had a lady I was going to interview the other day on the radio, and she says, "Well, does the helmet give you that much protection?" I said, "Well, hell, I'd hate to go out there without one." You know?
Yes, sir.
Hey guys, I'm Therese Paylor. I cover the Chiefs for the Kansas City Star. Been a pretty interesting conversation, but I got a question for Carl. Hey man, I'm sure you heard today that five former Chiefs filed a lawsuit against the team, alleging that, or at least wanting to see if the team could have done more about brain injuries at that time. I was just wondering, like, what was the protocol back in the early 80s, early 90s, if you thought a player had a head injury? And are you guys confident you did all you could to protect them?
Well, first of all, I'm not aware of this
Okay.
lawsuit. I understand it's outside of the lawsuit that they just settled. But specific to that, you know, you have to rely on your medical staff. And we thought we had an outstanding one, headed up by Dr. John Brown. I think that Trent can attest to what he did for our players when he was in charge. You always want the very, very best, and I know that John always felt that way. As he got the finest neurologist, neurosurgeon specialist for Trent. But, you know, I can't speak specifically about those individuals that played for us at that particular time right now, because I'm not that knowledgeable about exactly what they are contesting at this point. I'm not sure. Maybe you probably have a better handle on it than I do.
Yeah, no, they just
Excuse me.
they want to know what the Chiefs knew about brain injuries and like how serious the consequences could be and when. I mean, that's basically it. And they're also seeking financial damages.
Let me just jump, in case you folks didn't hear about it. There was a lawsuit filed today by 5 former Chiefs players, one of them being Kevin Porter. That would probably be the most recognizable
Phillips.
name. And these players played late 80s, early 90s. And this lawsuit is outside the settlement, which was the tentative settlement, which was reached by the NFL. So it just came across the wire this afternoon. I saw it, and it was not very specific. So that's about all that I know in regards to it. So
Let's
Thank
do
you.
one final question.
sure. We have another question over here? Yeah.
Quick question. As an athletic trainer that works with high school sports, What exactly, I know, Trent, you said in 2006, with the Chiefs, they had a pretty good protocol set up with concussions. What has changed? What is the NFL's protocol on concussion management? Because like I said, from working with high school athletes and the recognition of going from, the terminology of that he has a mild concussion or a major concussion to just, it's a concussion, kid's out, to now, like I said, the kids are starting to see actual big name players come out of a game with concussion and miss extended time. That never used to happen back in the day. Whenever a player in the NFL had a concussion, he played the next game, he played the next down. So like I said, I'm starting to see with the kids in high school levels, they see that a player comes out, they may be out for a week. Whenever we have a kid with concussion, I've never really see a kid come back the very next week. We see it all the time, reports of, RG3 has a concussion and he comes back the next week and plays in the very next game. Does that send a mixed message to young youth athletes?
I think there's a protocol that is in place, and each team are under the guidelines of that. And I think and having not been in the league for a few years, my understanding with the last collective bargaining agreement is that every team has to have an independent neurosurgeon or neurologist.
Right.
That the players have to get cleared. So there is someone independent of the team, and that was, Carl would be able to say, that was always the players, fans, whoever would always think, oh, well, the doctor is, with management, and so they're trying to get him back out there. And as players, I never really felt that, whether it be with John Brown or any other team doctor. I always had a good relationship, whoever those team doctors were. So I think to knock down that wall, that's why each team is required to have an independent neurosurgeon or neurologist on site to be able to make those evaluations. Then when it comes to, as you're specifically saying, RG3 coming back the following week, he had to go through a long protocol. Conrad has talked about the impact test. I'm sure he had to pass the impact test. He had to pass neurological test, cognitive test, balance tests. There's a number of different things that they have to pass to get back. At least that's my understanding of what the protocol
and to
is.
follow up on it, I think what you're saying is the players that stay out for like 4 or 5 weeks, I really think that has a great impact on parents trying to raise their kids, so to say he had to stay out. And I think it works in the reverse way with RG3, or is that his name, RG3, or whatever it is? RG4, 5, and 6, that he came back within the next week to play. So you got a negative impact there, a positive impact there. It's still up to the parents to work with their kids in that aspect.
Let me just say, specific to yourself, we're very proud of the fact USA Football, that the National Athletic Trainers Association has come on board with us, endorsing USA Football and the Heads Up Football program. And, it's our hope, it's expensive and it will take a while, but that every youth football league has a full-time trainer there to assist players. A question specific to doctors at the NFL level, most team doctors are orthopedic surgeons because the majority of injuries are orthopedic injuries, quite obviously. Head trauma is a whole different aspect. We always had a head trauma doctor with us with the Chiefs. Not everybody did. Now it is mandatory. Trent is absolutely right. The league requires it, and they have to be an independent neurologist, and that person will go to that player when there's been a head injury, and he'll make that decision about taking him out, and then obviously has to go through these tests, and they become much more stringent about letting these guys go back on the field. Again, the more research we get, the better I think it will become. But it is a problem. Again, I would reiterate, head injuries are not just a youth football problem at the youth level. I mean, the number one head injury is skateboarding, quite obviously, and even when kids wear helmets. But at the end of the day, we have a great game called American football, and people want to play it. Kids want to play it. Yeah, we have worked too hard, I think, maybe on the media side, whether the Madden series, NFL films, to Grandice, the big hit. Nothing as an ex-coach made me more upset than a guy trying to blow up a player and miss the tackle, and the guy runs for 60 yards and a touchdown. You're a safety position, your job, you're the last guy in the defense. Get him down. Tackle him properly.
No one
use your
wraps up.
shoulders. And
No one
wrap them
wraps
up,
up.
exactly. And I would just say to the head football coach here you can't coach that long, you're too young, but thank you for what you do and what you have done. Youth football coaches, specifically high school football coaches, make such an impact on youth. And I know you know this, and I know that a guy that we coached with, and Dick Vermeil, would always bring back a high school football coach and to talk to the entire team because he knew the impact. NFL players, whether they liked him or not, always remembered their high school football coach.
That's true.
And made an impression indelible for the rest of their life. So appreciate what you have done and continue to do it. I hope on the behalf of USA Football we have more guys like you coaching our great game of football.
Folks, thanks so much for coming. Conrad, Trent,
Thank you.
Carl, enjoyed the conversation. And Steve?
I just want to thank all four of you guys. When we first talked about doing this, we set our sights on 4 people that we wanted to be part of this discussion. We went 4 for 4. 2 of them came off injured reserve. Trent, I know we can't see your knee, but you look disgustingly good and healthy.
Thank you.
Carl flew all the way in from New York to do this and is flying back tomorrow. So thank all of you guys.
Thank you. All right.